So in this module, we're going to briefly touch upon the key elements regarding nutrition that allow you to achieve your ideal physique. Now, if you're somebody that's looking to build muscle mass, you're going to need the right nutrients. And if you're somebody that wants to lose fat, then understand that the more muscle you have, the higher likelihood you have at dropping body fat and achieving your ideal physique. And so regardless of if you're on this side, the other, or somewhere in between, understand that these few elements are key for you to not just absorb, but start to actually apply into your day-to-day life. Because the last thing I want is for you to make progress and then lose that progress. I want these to be things that are instilled into your brain. I know we talked on the subconscious versus the conscious brain. So now that you understand these concepts, I want you to understand the following information so that you can do this over the long term and actually keep these results. So first and foremost, whether you're on that fat loss side, muscle mass side, or somewhere in between, I know most of you guys in here are trying to build muscle. But if you understand these concepts, it's going to be applicable to you. So first and foremost, we need to understand that protein is key. The reason protein is so important is because in our bloodstream, protein breaks down into amino acids, which are smaller blocks that are all attached to one another to build up protein. And so if we want those amino acids, the protein blocks, in a sense, to unchain and actually be absorbable into our bloodstream, we need to make sure that A, we have enough, and B, we have the right kinds. So let's first talk about why protein is important. Well, protein is going to have a satiating effect on your body. So this means it's going to keep you super sustained, super full. You're not going to have this hunger going through the roof. And it's also going to keep your blood sugar nice and steady, right? And we have nice steady blood sugar. What that allows our body to do is, eliminate cravings. So for those of you guys that are on the fat loss side of the spectrum, it's going to be easier for you to not eat food that is not going to lead to the result you want, right? It's going to be easier to have more control over your eating choices. And now if you're on the muscle building side, you need to understand that as you stay leaner and you have less fat, you're going to be more receptive to actually building new muscle, and you're going to absorb more of the nutrients from the food you eat. So regardless which side of the coin you're on, protein is super key. Now, how much protein do we need? We've talked about how there are different benefits. And, we also know that the more protein you eat, the less likely you eat the other junk food, right? We also know that's going to help build new muscle mass up, right? But what do we eat when it comes to protein? Well, first we need to figure out at a baseline how much we need for our goals. So first and foremost, you need to understand that if you can eat enough protein, it's going to make so much of a difference when it comes to achieving your ideal physique. Now, the first step in this process is making sure that you have your protein target nailed down, and doing this is going to make about 60 to 70% of the results that you want. So regardless of trying to be perfect, if we can just get our protein target down, that's going to be a lot easier to stick with, and we're going to start to see tangible results. Now, when you eat enough protein, it's going to also allow you to get better workouts so you can lift heavier and continue building more. So when we understand that protein is so key, now we can look at the numbers themselves and what we actually need for our goals. Now, as a rule of thumb, if we can aim for 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, then we're going to be in a good starting point. And from there, we can make adjustments. Now, you guys don't have to worry a whole ton, because if you're in my program, you know what that number looks like. And I use a specific calculator that's going to, formulate what you need for your goals. But most of you guys are going to be close to that 1 gram per pound of body weight. So if you weigh 150 pounds, you're more likely going to be around 150 grams, right? But the exception is if you're 150, but maybe your protein target is 150 grams, but you weigh more like 170, 180. The reason for this is because you have a little bit more body fat than somebody that's in single digit body fat, right? And so you need to understand that not just is it a number that's going to line up with your weight, it's also a number that's going to be factored in with a lot of other variables, especially when it comes to fat stores. So if you have body fat at a certain level, you're not going to be able to even absorb that. So I'm not going to give you too much. I'm going to give you what you need. And as you get leaner by eating more protein, building more muscle, then we can gradually increase that if necessary. So all of you guys have your protein targets in there on the training app and the program, but you need to understand why we're doing this in the first place. So when we can hit our protein target, it's going to be very, very easy to follow through with, because we have protein plus carbs plus fats, which equal overall calories. So we want to look from two sides of the spectrum. One, we don't want to be eating too many calories because we'll be putting on too much fat, but also we don't want to be under eating or eating too little of calories. It's going to be tough to actually build muscle. So we want to find that middle ground. So you guys have it taken care of because I've given you the answers as to what you should do, but understanding this in a more framework level, I think is going to be helpful. Now, as you get leaner, you can slowly and gradually increase your protein intake up, but just looking at protein itself is super important, because if you have your protein down and your calories aren't monitored, then your carbs and your fats end up just falling in line, right? So you need to, of course, be mindful of these things. But if you're focusing on keeping your calories where they should be and also eating enough protein, then there's only so many extra calories left over for carbs and fats. Once you understand when it comes to protein why it's so important, we can next look at the next variable, which is what types of protein sources are best. So we want to look in this totem pole for a sense, right? So we have at the top of the list the nutrients that are most eligible to be derived into your bloodstream, which are going to be things like your animal proteins, right? The reason for this is they're going to be broken down into those amino acid chain blocks a lot easier. And so we're going to have at the top of the list things like red meat, which could be your steak, your pork, your lamb, your beef, etc. Underneath that, we can look at things like poultry, so like chicken. We can look at things like fish. And as we get lower and lower and lower, we can look more towards things like, dairy products, whether that be cheese, yogurt, and then supplements at the bottom, protein powder and stuff, right? And so where I'm getting with all this is the animal-based foods are typically best, but I also understand there are some people in this program that don't eat animal-based foods. And so that's why these things like the supplements or the fish or the chicken is going to be a next best alternative. Now, the reason there is this totem pole in a sense is because the top of the list, these items like the red meat, not only are they going to have the most amount of protein, but they're also going to be most absorbable, right? So not all of these amino acids from the protein will actually be broken down into your bloodstream, especially if you have an intolerance or some sort of allergy. But if you can aim for these animal meats at the top of the list and get a lot of that in throughout the day, then use the chicken, use the fish, use the protein powders, the supplements, the granola bars, etc. towards the bottom of the list. But the reason they're at the bottom of the list is because it's going to be tough for you to absorb all these nutrients. And so you're going to get more excess calories. You're going to not be as efficient with actually breaking these down as you would with the animal-based options. So now that you have a good rule of thumb over what to do, you can know that, okay, this is the best option, right? Animal proteins, and this is the worst option. Even though there's no such thing as a worst option, it's just not as optimal. This would be like your protein bars, your protein shakes, your Greek yogurt, right? All these sorts of things, right? And the main reason for that is, A, there are not going to be as many of those amino acids that you need to actually absorb the protein in the first place. B, some of you in here, and more people rather than not, have intolerances or allergies. They say something like 1 out of every 3 people have an intolerance to dairy. And so just to give you an example, if that has less amino acids, less protein content, and it's unlikely that everybody can absorb it and people have intolerances with it, then the top of the list is going to be ideal, right? But you can work your way down. You just want to think about aiming for the top of the list. And when you can't hit top of the list, whether it be because you have intolerances, whether it's because you don't have food left in the fridge, or whether you're out and about at a restaurant on the go, you can start to slowly work your way down and go for the next best option. Because one thing I like to live by is if you don't have best available, then you can go with better. So if you don't have the best available protein source, then go with the next best thing. And it allows you to have this nice balance, this nice in-between approach where maybe you're not perfect all the time, but you can work your way down. So now that you have a good sense over what amount of protein is best for you and why, and the types of protein sources you should be aiming for, we're next going to talk about carbohydrates, and then from there we'll move into fats. And at the end of this part of the course, I'm going to give you some bonus modules, so make sure you stay all the way to the end. I'll see you guys in the next module where we break down carbohydrates.